I wanted to make a quick video showing you how to make these three shapes from this activity and how to change the material within Fusion. So let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to make this shape, but the first thing I want to do is I want to make a new folder. Let's call it Material Properties. And let's go ahead and open up that new folder. And let's start a new file. And before we get started, let's go ahead and take a look at this shape. So let me see here. I want to close out my data panel. And I want to get a view of this in here. So let's see. Can I make my Fusion a little bit smaller so I can see what I'm making? I can't make it much smaller than that, but I can click back and forth. So it says that this object has a spacing of 0.25 inches in the grid if you reach a direction. So that means every square here is 1/4 of an inch. And so how wide is this entire thing? Well, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's 2.25. If 2 is 8 squares, then 2.25 would be 9. And then we go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be $1.25 or 1.25. Let's go ahead and build this rectangle from our front view. We're going to grab our rectangle tool and put it on our origin. And I want it to be a height of 1.25. And I'm going to hit Tab. And I want it to have a width of 2.25. And hit Enter on my keyboard. I'm going to go ahead and finish my sketch. And how far back does it extrude? If we look, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So it goes back 4, which is 0.25 times 4 is $1, so just 1 inch back. Now what we're going to do is we have to create this loft shape. If you look, it's slightly different on the front than it is on the back. It makes the same general shape, but it's smaller on the back. And so we call this a loft cut. So if we start a new sketch on the front, we can sketch out this front V first. So I'm going to grab my line tool, I'm going to zoom in. And I want to make sure I don't click the corners or the center so it doesn't lock. Just draw a line somewhere over here connected to this top edge and bring it down and then bring it up over here. I'm going to right click and hit OK. Then what I'm going to do, instead of dimensioning everything on both sides, I'm going to show you a trick. I'm going to grab my line tool and I'm going to turn on construction lines over here in my sketch palette, and I'm going to draw a line from this corner to the corner of my shape. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. I'm going to draw a construction line from this corner right here of my V to the corner of my shape. And so if you look closely, I should have 2 construction lines here and here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell those 2 lines to be equal. So I'm going to find my equal constraint and tell these 2 lines to be equal. And I'm also going to tell these 2 lines to be equal. Now I don't want this line to be equal to this line right here, but I do want the mirror image to be equal to each other. So if one size grows, the other size grows equally. Now I only have to put down the dimensions on one side, and everything else will be equal. And so what do I need to do? Well, I need to figure out what is the length from here to here. If I go to my home view, I might be able to see it a little better. What is the distance from this point to this point? If we look, it looks like it's exactly one grid, which is 0.25. So if I grab my dimension tool, I can click on this point right here and this point over here. And you got to make sure you actually hit that second point there. And I'm going to tell it to be 0.25. And that automatically makes this side 0.25 as well. And since I made these 2 equal, it should have automatically made this point directly in the center. So all I need to do is give it a height. I'm going to go back to my front view here. I'm going to go from this point to the bottom. And if I look, it looks like that is exactly 1 grid space down as well, which we established is 0.25 inches. So I'm just going to type in 0.25 and I should have a fully constrained sketch. I'm going to go ahead and finish my sketch and go to my home view. So that's the first sketch for my loft. I need to go ahead and add that second sketch. So I'm going to go to the back and I'm going to draw this smaller V. And this V in the back is a little bit harder to see, but let's see if we can figure it out. I'm going to start a new sketch, go to my back face, And I'm going to pretty much do the exact same thing and just change the dimensions a little bit. So I'm going to grab my line tool. I'm going to draw a quick V for myself. I'm going to grab my line tool again and turn on construction lines and create these two construction lines from end to end. Right click OK. I'm going to tell my construction lines to be equal with my equal constraint. And I'm going to tell these two lines to be equal with my equal constraint. And I can bring it up a little bit or down. I'm going to hit Control Z because it looked like it glitched out there just a little bit. That's no big deal. Just if it does something like that, make sure you just undo. But now all I need to do is add the final dimension. So I'm going to go to this sort of modified isometric view from the back instead of the front and take a look. And we could even go over here and look at it from here and say, well, what is the distance between this edge and this edge? Well, it's 2 grids, which is 0.5. So if I look over here, I'm going to give this from this point to this point, if I can find it. I'm going to give it a distance of 0.5, which means this side should also be 0.5 automatically. And then the question is what is the distance from this point to the bottom or the top? And from the back, it's actually a little bit easier to see it from the top, because if you follow the edge along this isometric line, you can see the height above this point. It goes down 1, 2 before we get there. So what is 2 grid spaces? Well, that's 0.5. And so this point to the top edge would be 0.5. And so now we have that fully constrained sketch. We've got both of our sketches that we just made fully constrained. I'm going to go ahead and finish my sketch. And I'm going to find my loft tool. And I'm going to click on both of these sketches here. So I'm going to select the first one, go to my back view, and select the second one. And I want to make sure that it's an option to cut and hit OK. And you can see we've done a loft cut for this shape. But if you read your directions, this is not all we needed to do. After we make this shape, we need to actually make it out of high-density polyethylene, which is a type of plastic material. So let's go back to Fusion. And let's change the material. I'm going to go ahead and widen this back out so we get a better view. And there's a couple ways we can do this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to Modify. And I'm going to go to physical material. You can also go here into bodies and right click and go to physical materials and there's a couple other ways too, I'm sure. But let's go ahead and just go through modify first. And let's go to physical material. And I'm going to close out this tab. I'm going to go looking for polyethylene. So it's in plastic. So look in plastic and we will scroll down to P. Let me see if I can find P, PE, PV, polyethylene. Looks like, okay, here we go. We found it. PO, polyethylene. And we got low density and high density. We want to select high density. And I'm just going to click and drag it onto the body. I can either drag it here or on the body itself in the graphics window and drop it on there. And then I can just go ahead and close out my physical materials. You might notice that it's not really closed out. I'm just sort of taking the palette, moving it off to the side and minimizing it. To do this next part, you actually have to close it out. You can't right click on the body, I've discovered, if you have this palette open. So you do need to close it out. If it's minimized, you need to open it up and hit close, or you could just hit escape on your keyboard and it should disappear. But then you have to go over here to your bodies within your browser and right click on the body and go down to properties. And you should see the physical properties of the shape that we just created, including the density of the material we are using. Now notice that the density and the mass are both in ounces instead of pounds. Don't stress too much about that. You can just multiply it by 16 to get the new number. But we can actually start plugging in our numbers now. So our area, just to let you know, that is the surface area of the object you created. It calculated it for you. You can fill that information in right here. If we go back, the volume is 2.24 inches cubed, so you can fill that information in right here. If we go back, the density is 0.55 ounce mass, meaning instead of pounds per inches cubed, it's in ounces per inches cubed. And so is the mass. It's in ounces instead of pounds. And so you can go ahead and fill in your ounces and your density in ounces over here. And then if you want to convert it to pounds, well, you can just multiply both numbers by 16 and it'll give you the mass in pounds, and it'll give you the density in pounds per inches cubed. And then you should be able to answer the rest of the questions on this page. And you should be able to create the other shapes as well. They're a little simpler than the one we just did, although they do have a different material each time. So go ahead and give this activity a try on your own and see how you do.